Vernon Oakes, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you with me today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. Um, really glad to be here with you.
So you shared an interesting uh, paper napkin, and I'm curious where it came from. So let me read it out loud. Watching everyday people make powerful business decisions started my journey to love cooperatives. Why did you share that with me?
Well, it was a turning point in my life. So I'm in Washington, D.C. I've started a property management business. I ended up managing some housing co-ops, smaller units, basically run by middle-aged, elderly Black women. And I have an MBA from Stanford, and these people may have had a high school degree, but they were asking the right kinds of questions. They were holding each other accountable, and they just made really wonderful decisions. And I got extremely curious. Where do they get this information to run this business as well as they were doing? And that started me to learn about co-ops, which I did not get in my MBA program, this cooperative business model. And I've been on that journey now 30 years.
It's interesting, right? When we learn systems and structure, let's say in education, like MBA, like you had your MBA, it's interesting to see real life examples where people are applying lessons learned in a different way. So, what did you, when you got curious about these elderly Black women who are running the cooperative, where did they get their education from? Where did they learn to ask such great questions?
So there's co-ops have values and principles. Is one of the reasons I like them. Too often, the capitalistic model values and principle is how you make more money. Okay, and whether you leave the environment messed up or people messed up, broken, it doesn't make any difference. Just how do you make more money? In the co-op, they have values and principles, and the fifth principle is education, uh, knowledge, and information. And so that these cooperators were ongoingly getting trained. And when they had some particular issue they didn't know how to solve, they would go get help. Now, in Washington, D.C., the government had set aside money for trainers, mostly nonprofit organizations that did this training. So they got this just in time information.
Vernon,
Um,
I lost you. Just give me 1 second. Vernon, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, just 1 second, please. Vernon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Am I back?
Okay.
All right, great. So my apologies for that. So you answered the question, which is great, and I know we've captured that. So why don't we start off from there? Um, your answer was related to my question was, where did the education come from? Your answer was related to how co-ops have values and principles versus the capitalistic model that is more profit motivated. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's just pick up from there. So in thinking about how cooperators are really based around the coalescing of values and principles, um, is that something that is just unique in cooperatives, do you find, or do you think that some companies can learn from that example as well?
So I do think that companies can learn from it. I do believe Adam Smith, who's normally called the father of capitalism, he had a book about that humans are basically sympathetic and they want to help each other. I don't think he would have envisioned our capitalistic model today because that seemed to have gotten lost. And he talked about that. Where in my training in the MBA program, it was every decision was made on what's the greatest return on investment, ROI. So that was to shareholders and management. So that seemed to be the value, the main value. What kind of return do you get? In this co-op, the values are self-help. So it starts with the individual, self-determination, democracy, equity, equality, and solidarity. I may have missed one. But it starts with one person, how you help yourself, but in the context of the solidarity of the group. So decisions are made basically on what's best for the group, whatever the co-op is. And that I just found extremely exciting.
Let's go back to the sort of like the revelation, right? Like, I mean, here you are, MBA, you're coming in to serve these organizations, these cooperatives. You're confronting these, being confronted maybe by these great questions from people and in places that you didn't expect, right? So how did you pivot into that being, or was it immediate? Was it like a lightning bolt, or was it something that you discovered over time to understand this? Because you did talk about it starting in a journey to love cooperatives. So was it the beginning of something, or was it a lightning bolt?
That was the beginning of the lightning bolt. Was like, wow, what is this? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got in when I was doing these MBA classes. I didn't like this. Every decision is made on what's the greatest return on investment. I didn't know how to articulate it. Okay, because you have the environment, you have the planet, you have all of these different. You have the employees, you have all of these different variables to consider, and profit. And so it was the lightning bolt was just there are some organizations, some business out there that work differently. And there's also the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. And I love this caring for others part of it. And I didn't learn all of this right away. Far from it. Getting involved in regional housing co-op groups and then the national housing co-op group, and just keep learning and just kept learning.
That's powerful. So you just kept on learning about it. One of the things you did talk about, which I thought was really interesting, you talked about Adam Smith, right? And when he talked about corporations, he did talk about corporations becoming part of the fabric of a community, that the community serves the corporation and the corporation learns to serve the community, and it does that by seeking profit, right? So profit becomes the inevitable byproduct of making a contribution. And isn't it interesting that I think what you're saying is that maybe some corporations have gotten past that to just ROI and sort of like went past the contribution part. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, and just what you just said, I did not hear. If it was taught at Stanford, I didn't get it. Okay, that part of it, I didn't hear that. It was only in this knowledge and in my radio show when people bring it up. But I grew up in West Virginia. I grew up in Bluefield, West Virginia. My grandfather worked in the mines. My father worked on the railroad. And so I saw the organizations, Norfolk and Western Railroad and the mines taking, leaving the mountains and the water streams polluted and erosion and messed up. And eventually the employees, too often they lost their their retirement. And so you had broken people and broken mountains and broken trees. So I watched that extraction happening, and it happens too often. But are there B Corps now, or are there corporations around that are helping the community and they know that's a part of what they're about? Yes. But I think they're the minor part.
So in your journey to love cooperatives, I mean, like, why do you think cooperatives are not as pervasive or as big as they seem to be right now? Why do you believe that to be the case?
So I sort of emphasize marketing, and I taught marketing for a while, and then there's competition. And so the main competition for the capitalistic model is the cooperative model. The capitalists have the money. And so this is a belief. I don't have any research or any evidence of it, but I don't believe the capitalists want people to understand the cooperative model. Okay, the capitalists are they own the radio stations, the televisions, the newspapers. They say what gets across. You don't hear about the good work of co-ops, which is one of the reasons I started the radio program. You don't hear the stories of people helping people, people helping the community helping people. In down times, such as the Great Depression and Great Recessions, co-ops survived because communities were helping them. They had this marriage, this relationship. So I think that to me turns out to be one of the main reasons. And the other reason is co-ops talk amongst themselves and they tell each other about their stories, but they don't go out and tell it. They're beginning to do more of that, going out of the cooperative arena and telling people about co-ops and getting people involved in. The other thing is co-ops are hard work. They don't just happen. They're not just successful without a lot of work, particularly you've got to get training, implementation. Yeah, it's hard work.
Well, it sounds like all the things that cooperatives do really well are things that companies need to do well, and the things that maybe it's a this and as opposed to this or. So what are the things that let's talk at all organizations can learn, and how did you apply this? Again, you're coming from an MBA marketing perspective. You're coming in to serve these organizations, and you turn out to become a student of them, and you fall in love with them in this journey. So talk about what are the lessons learned? Like, how do we learn those lessons? How do we make it a this and as opposed to it doesn't have to be an either or, right?
True. Rebecca Henderson, a Harvard professor, wrote a book called Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire. That was she wrote that book before all of the wildfires and all of the things that are happening in our climate. But she was on my radio show, and my last question to her is, "What do you see the future?" And she said she reimagined capitalist organizations becoming more like co-op organizations, and that I found extremely interesting. And that is all of this, as you said, Adam Smith said, is that the capitalistic, these organizations are helping the community. They do extract from the community both labor and natural resources, but they give back to the communities and support the community. That would, and I think that's the whole B Corp and organizations. And I worked for a company called Cummins Engine Company right out of Stanford, and they were more like, they were extremely big on helping the community and a small community in Indiana, Columbus, and helping the employees. They were big on it, which I really like that organization. So there are organizations out there that do it, capitalistic organizations, but it's more toward helping each other, caring for others.
Yeah, and I think that idea. I mean, I think the best organizations do care about their people, care about the planet, care about, not just necessarily B Corps. And yes, B Corps are this small layer of certified organizations. But I think that, even if we think about smaller businesses, they tend to have to operate more on this basis because it becomes a differentiator, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you look at your customers, if smaller business and communities, the organization must look at what's best for those customers so they'll get repeat business. Yeah, so yeah, it's a part of the mix.
Yeah, yeah. So let's also talk about, so when you're talking about um, everyday people making powerful business decisions, do you find that the cooperative also, uh, you talked about self-help being one of the values, one of the first values of the cooperative model. In looking at that self-help part of it, are they able to then improve their community outside of the cooperative model? Like, what does that look like? I mean, are the people who are involved in cooperatives more empowered in their families? Do they have better outcomes, or better? Are they? Tell me that story, because that I find fascinating too.
Okay, so there was a research piece that looked at HUD-funded apartment buildings, HUD-funded limited equity co-ops or co-ops, and the co-ops outperform the apartment buildings in any value variable you can think of. Okay, and when you start talking about, they had a 17% return on the money that they put in, and you normally put in something similar to a first month's rent. It could be $5,000 or $10,000 to buy in. There's one of the values is you put money in and you're able to get money out when and if there's a profit. So people in this study, the building, the physical plant of the co-op was much better than the physical plant of the apartment building, because the apartment building had an investor, and if they were looking at it replacing a roof or keep fixing it, they would likely keep fixing it, and then they would maybe get the inside walls damp and messed up and mold and all of this stuff. Where in the cooperative model, they would replace the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was saying they would make extremely good decisions, and mostly long-term, long and short-term, but they looked out long-term. What's going to be best for the people in this community? And then you had some things like there's a hardship committee, and then there's rules in this hardship committee, and they put so much money, the co-op put so much money in it every month, so that if Vernon, who's a member there, loses his job, then he can get up to 3 months, say, of his membership fee or rent, if you will, paid by the hardship committee. And so there were things put into place that would help the members survive in hard times, good times. And there's always celebrations, whether around July 4th or Juneteenth or November and Thanksgiving. So it's bringing people together, looking out for each other. If somebody passes in your family, you get $100 from the co-op.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's and sympathy cards and all that. So it is a community helping each other.
Yeah. So could the easy, the easy criticism around this be, and I don't mean criticism, but the HUD being outperformed by the co-op. Sometimes people think that the only reason why that happens is co-ops have more volunteer hours and HUDs have to pay for everything. That's not what you're saying, right? I mean, you're not saying that it's just the freebies. You're talking about planning. You're talking about execution against the plan. You're talking about a strategic plan that is being implemented in alignment with values consistently over time. That just sounds like a really good performing organization.
That's what it is. Okay, and that's the love. You have an organization that is working for the benefit of its members. That's what a co-op is. It's an organization that's formed by its members for the benefits of its members, and it's performing that way. And HUD has an insurance. It's sort of like insurance for if you go bankrupt or if you lose the property or you don't pay your mortgage and you're foreclosed on. They have insurance. That the co-op insurance was not used. It was seldom used, and it just built up. They built up the revenue. Where on the other side of it, with the capitalistic model, the apartment buildings, this insurance was being used all the time. So yeah, it worked. Volunteerism isn't the main thing. It is the love for each other and wanting the benefit of the organization. Yeah, quick, Govind. There was a German lady in a property in Virginia that I was managing. She had married an African American during World War II, and they were living in this co-op. And she said, people are always saying that we don't get, because it's limited equity, we don't get much equity. She said, but I was able to raise my 3 children here in a safe, nurturing environment. And she had a doctor, a lawyer, and I don't know what the third one was. And she said, so I was able to, my net worth, my value was in my family and my family's growth. And that to me, it sort of summarized a lot of what cooperatives are.
I remember years ago working with an organization, and when I was coaching that organization, they came to the conclusion that really what they were all about was that love at work and work at love. And if you worked at love and had love at work, that was everything in the world. That was all you needed to focus on. And it's interesting that you use the word love a few times. It's not a word that's often used in traditional companies, right? But it is something that is probably much more common in the co-op environment. That people want to love their community, have love for each other, even people that they may disagree with on the various committees in the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what you're talking about? Like that there needs to be more love at work? Isn't that what is really at the heart of this?
So when I talked about the values, the ethical values, and I said it was honesty, openness, social responsibility, that social part of it, and then caring for others. Those are the values that I end up liking the most. I mean, democracy is cool, solidarity is cool, all of that, equity, all of that's good. But when you talk about, okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to hide things from you, whether it's finances or whatever. I'm going to be social responsible. So I'm concerned about our community. I'm concerned about the community at large. And I'm going to show you love. And we may disagree on 90% of the things. But and then there's training for how you solve disagreements. And I've learned through this co-op stuff that if you and I, Govind, had a disagreement, if I can learn to listen to you, we may be on opposite positions, but if I can learn to listen to you and you listen to me, then we can find something probably much better than what each of us think we have and what we think is the answer. And that's one of the other reasons that it becomes extremely successful, these co-ops.
Yeah, it really feels like what you're talking about is that the model has a lot to teach us, right? Teach us about how we can resolve conflict and how we can collaborate and find solutions. And isn't that a subject that is so important for right now in a divisive, time? People are concerned about a lot of different things. If we could learn to listen to each other and cooperate with one another, we might find that the answer is not what I think or what you think, but a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B, and we end up with something else that's just magical, isn't it? Isn't that where,
Much better. Yeah,
isn't that the way that co-ops are designed to work? Um,
absolutely.
I love that kind of thinking. What else do you think that, I mean, what do you think that other than this idea, this collaborative model, what other thing do you think that co-ops have to teach us right now? What do you think that we should be thinking about? Maybe is there something that we can incorporate in our private lives away from organizations that's consistent with the cooperative model?
Okay, I want to speak to what you said about us using this in other areas. So I had my property management business in Washington, D.C. Often in these board meetings or membership meetings, we would say, boy, if we could just get the government right down the street to operate this way, wouldn't we have a much better form of governance if our U.S. House and Senate and executive branch could work like this amongst and between each other? Yeah, it would we would utilize our resources a lot better, and we would have a much better uh, United States for all Americans. Okay, there's enough. There's enough resources for us all. It's just that right now our structure looks like it gives more to the haves and less to the have-nots. Where you get three guys with the most net worth have more net worth than the bottom 50% of the people. Okay, in the US. And it's hard to come out of that bottom 50% now.
Yeah.
I was able to do it through education. So let me answer your question. There's worker co-ops. That's co-ops that's owned and controlled by the employees. There's consumer co-ops. Those are credit unions and housing co-ops, rural electric co-ops. They're owned and controlled by the people that use the products or services. And then there are marketing co-ops like Cabot Creamery, or purchasing co-op like Ace Hardware. So you get these different models, and farmers use them a lot, particularly marketing and purchasing co-ops. I am just sort of hopeful that these, if you go back that the U.S. is for the people, by the people, it's this model being implemented in all organizations and in governments is what will get our Constitution to really work for all of the people.
One of the things that I'm really struck by your model, and I'm thinking about farmer co-ops, I'm thinking about the purchasing co-ops and the credit co-ops and all the other versions of them that you're talking about. And I think what I'm struck by is the model of cooperatives and the fundamental part of cooperatives that's enduring and everlasting is it's you and me, right? The terminology really is you and me, not you or me. And that infinite resource mindset, that abundance mindset versus that there's enough for you and me versus no, either you get it or I get it. And, the rest be damned. That part of it is not there. And I want to thank you for sharing that with me. I find that that's a bit of a revelation, and that's something we can learn from. Thank you, Vernon.
Thank you. And I wonder if you're a billionaire with all of those zeros, why do you need more and more and more and more and more? And I have it through Citizen United that the billionaires are buying politicians to come in and create policies that they would have to pay less taxes or to get more breaks. Tax credits are for the billionaires. Okay, and HUD stopped giving loans for these co-ops and started doing tax credits, and housing co-ops can't get them. But in the co-op model, the individual residents get whatever benefits there. In a tax credit model, the investor gets the benefit. They get the return. And so a lot of our policies are created to help the haves, the billionaire class, to get more. And that one just gets me. I mean, I also have a master's in math. So if you're getting 10% of a billion, what's it, 100 million a year? Okay. I mean, how much more do you need? 5% of a billion, 50 million a year without having to work? So yeah, there's something going on that I believe will hurt our planet, will hurt people, and this is going on internationally, it's not just in the US. And that if we don't get control over it, we'll have more and more wildfires and hurricanes and people migrating or immigrating all over, looking for better, looking for food, looking for good water. And we got
for the grass, the greener grass, right? That's what happens.
Yeah.
So I want to end there. Thank you, Vernon. I appreciate you joining me here today.
Thank you. And I think we could talk all day, so I appreciate the time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.